Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're listening to 93.5 FM, Unity FM, and I am Shalina Lit. Welcome to my show. This topic, as always, will be on raising children. With me, I am really happy to say I have Osama Ray Douglas. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay, so I want to get straight to the point today. We're covering the topic of youth today, and you have come up with something that I think is, really needed in today's times with reference to youth and the fact that they're not really doing much. So what is it that you've got planned? Because I know that you're a man of many projects, but yeah, if you just introduce yourself briefly, and then we can go on to what it is you have in the pipelines, inshallah.
Okay. Like you said, my name's Ray Douglas, or some people know me as Osama Douglas. I've been as a revert Muslim of nearly approximately 20 years now. Mm-hmm. So I've seen the change in the demographic, especially around youth, around reverts, around Muslim, etc. identity, like many of the listeners out there. And one of the things, as a person who probably, like you mentioned, I'm probably known as a serial social entrepreneur. So there's a lot of things that I've been involved with, both locally, nationally, and internationally. Okay. But more over the last few years, I've doing work within the criminal justice system and pupil referral units, etc., and a lot of school-based work. I've identified this massive kind of vacuum of specifically young Muslims, both male and female, who are not engaged in public services, and additionally, which is probably a bit more critical, they're not involved in and around the faith-based community. Right. So yeah, they might pray Jummah, but the masjid is not an integral part of their life. Yeah. And it's almost what we talk about called the third space. And one of the things that concern me most, and yourself, if you look at some of the demographics around offending and reoffending, around Muslim youth being excluded from schools, it's increased massively over the last decade. Mm-hmm. So 2013, we'll be launching a program called Deenagers, and it's aimed at 13 to 19-year-old Muslim youth, and we're aiming to run 3 pilots, one in Birmingham, one in Manchester, and one in London, and we're going to look at different areas of their identity. We're not just going to talk about, the traditional things, but we're going to look at things obviously like leadership, but also things around identity. We're going to look at things around enterprise, also relationships, and we're going to really drill down and get to, and hopefully make some massive steps in engaging them and being part of their development.
Excellent. Yeah, because obviously, the whole topic of the show is raising children. And what I've done in the past is tried to raise the concerns that we have in the community. And one of the most common things that we found was that the masjids are not being used on a hub basis, which they should be. If we look at, the history of our religion, the masjid was almost like that central place. So I think the fact that masjids necessarily don't have the know-how on how to deal with this is brilliant, because as you said, you are reaching out to a large group of of young people, let's say, these Muslim and non-Muslim.
Yeah, I mean, the Deenagers is specifically for primarily for Muslims. However, if non-Muslims would like to get involved and they would like to participate, then I don't have a problem with that. The thing, back to what you said about the masjids, I think the masjids are sometimes stuck in between a rock and a hard place. Because we have to remember here that youth work is a professional qualification. Yeah. People go to university for many years and study very hard in order to become youth workers. What tends to happen is that it's almost seen as kind of, there's a difference between youth work and working with young people. There's a massive difference. And I don't think it's fair, per se, to afford the blame to the masjids in terms of the imam should be doing more. Because the imam is not a youth worker. He or she, or he or she or those involved with the masjid are in a lot of cases you have voluntary positions, but also in terms of the imamship, he has enough on his hands around leading the salawat, the more kind of traditional issues he has to face with families and stuff. What I'm talking about is direct youth intervention. So what we're talking youth work as targeted support, issue-based work, and with a faith-based model. And it's not going to be an evangelical faith-based model, but what we're trying to do is develop a safe space where young people can express themselves and not have their finger pointed at them, and not kind of feel like we're these kind of
they have to choose. Because I've covered this before, in terms of the fact that our young people nowadays are literally, swapping and changing between identities. They're in that people please mode. When they go home, it's like, Assalamu alaikum dad, and they're being the good Muslim child. When they go out on road, they gotta go out with a little bit of swagger, and then when they, so it's this Muslim, British, and then wherever they come from, and I think that it's great what you're saying is that this is an environment where they can be themselves, and they can, from what you're saying, learn how to, balance themselves
obviously within the Islamic framework. But what we're aiming to do is support them and develop them so they have the tools to navigate around being a young British Muslim. So they have something where they're engaged, and also, more importantly, working with their parents and their families. Because like you said, there's the thing that you mentioned there, it's the issue of double conscience. Am I Muslim, am I not? Am I British, am I Pakistani? Am I Arab, am I Somali? Am I a revert, am I Jamaican? There's a lot of the things that especially, this time of the year, between Christmas and the New Year period, you can see a lot of people who, we don't celebrate Christmas, but they literally are celebrating it, but just without saying it. However, our aim is to work with, and we're talking about the most marginalized, because what is happening is organizations, masajid, are working with their members' children, right? Which is fair enough, nothing wrong with that. And they're evidencing that as youth work. Those, for the most part, it's like that, to coin a phrase, it's like preaching to the choir. Have you heard that saying? No. The choir in the church perspective, there's no one more loyal to the church than the choir. They go 3-4 times a week, they practice. Likewise, if you're just working with your members' children, then essentially you've got a captivated audience. What we're trying to say is there's a lot of young people out there who are disaffected, marginalized. I see it when I go to the prisons. I see it when I go to the pupil referral units. I see it when I get the calls from parents who want me to do some intervention and some mediation. And like many of the youth workers out there, they see it as well. So you have whether it be issues around employment, identity, sexual health, drugs, gangs, violence, domestic violence, whatever it is, the list can go on. Who is addressing that? And who is addressing it in a structured manner?
And this is what I find is that, what I try to raise on the show is that parents or, people that are around young people have to understand what's going on in their minds. It isn't easy being who they are. But what I find, is, for example, with my own experiences, I'm Asian, but when I was growing up, I went through the whole, I want to be black, So a lot of people, even when they hear me talk sometimes, they're like, are you actually Asian? And I went through that whole transition of trying to understand who I was, why I, reached out to the black culture, Allah knows best. But for me, there was a big strength there, and I could identify with it. It was more so a music culture, I'd say, etc. But my parents didn't understand me. My parents had, they obviously were from back home, but I was British. And, they were immersing me in this culture and then expecting me to put my salwar kameez on and go make my roti and, and it wasn't happening because what had happened is, the culture in this, in Britain had overpowered me and overtaken me. And, I can relate now with the young person and in the work that I do today, outreach projects. And I think this is why this project is really important, because what you're doing is you're reaching out to the young people and you're helping them understand how to balance being who they are in today's society and preparing them for what's to come.
Well, there's something, you're right. I mean, there's two approaches to this. You have the indigenous born Muslims who, grown up in a Muslim household, because not every Muslim household is an Islamic household. There's a difference. But grown up in a Muslim household and have this, double conscience thing going on. So you find now that a lot of them are going from Islam to the road life.
Okay, yeah.
But then you also have a lot of the young people who are coming into Islam, embracing Islam, leaving their backgrounds. And let's have an honest conversation here. Not every revert, especially black revert, has been to prison. I met a young person the other day and he asked me if I was Muslim. I said, yeah. He goes, well, have you been to Penn? And I said, no, I haven't been to prison and I don't have a criminal record. But in the mind, it's almost like in the psyche, there's this thing where, you must have gone to prison to embrace Islam.
Yeah.
It's not like that. But also you have a lot of young people coming to Islam now, but there's no aftercare. There's no support mechanism. There's no mentorship. It's kind of, so there's a lot of dawah and the dawah is excellent. But this isn't just about getting shahadas. What about the aftercare? What about the follow through? So a lot of young people out there embracing, turning their life around in a spiritual sense and coming to Islam now, and then they're out there and they're within there's not enough cultural competency. And they kind of have to of just like play it by ear. And sometimes, they meet some great people and some people are doing their best. But we need a structured approach, because although there are people coming to the deen and taking their shahada, there are young people leaving as well.
Absolutely.
And I was just with some guys earlier on today, and I was discussing with them about their work doing. And I was talking about there was a funny incident in prison recently when I was doing some behaviour workshops there, and two young guys were arguing about, because we brought some outside catering, they were arguing, is the food halal, and they had a bit of a banter between each other. And then when you asked them, well, what are you in for, it was fraud, it was grooming, and our argument is, well, why are you putting so much energy if the sandwich is halal, but you're in here for fraud and you're in here for grooming? Do you get what I'm saying here?
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the young guys I was speaking to earlier, they were saying, likewise, they see people out drunk on a Saturday night, Muslims drunk on Broad Street, but they're in the food shops after the club asking if the food's halal. Do you understand? Yeah. Now, to some people, it might click, but the reality is that Allah says, eat halal and tayyib. He doesn't just say eat halal. And likewise, we can have beautiful big masjids with big chandeliers, but I would argue, and one of the drivers is that instead of fundraising for £30,000 for that carpet, employ a full-time youth worker. That's my position on it, because I'm not talking about your little local masajid. I'm talking about the big Jamia masjids. If you haven't got a part-time stroke full-time youth worker there, then really, essentially, how are you catering for the needs of young people? We don't need big chandeliers and pretty carpets. We need infrastructure so we can create social capital. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you raise some really valid points, and I think, what we've established is that, yes, the young people and even the adults are quite mixed up. I mean, when you go to Asda and you see, let's face it, the Muslim woman is strong in her identity. I think with males, you got it easy, or, you can walk with the beard, but with the Muslim woman, she's got the hijab on, this is a Muslim woman, and when you see her standing in front of some crackers, like Christmas crackers, it's like, okay, and part of me thinks, are we going to reach out to everybody? And what? No, that is just a reflection of the fact that because we haven't dealt with something as a community correctly, it follows through into adulthood. And until you have that clarity on how to manage Quran and Sunnah in your life and work it through raising your children in the workplace and all of these things, then you're going to continue the cycle. And your children, unfortunately, are going to be even more confused than you were, because they have the advancements of businesses that are out to capture their psyche and say, hey, we want you to put your hand in your pocket and go and buy this. And you know, let's face it, these businesses, they're not really concerned about the consequences in terms of if this child is where it's good for them to listen to music, etc.
Well,
you know.
yeah, I mean, you've made a very valid point there. Firstly, let's address the parenting one. Majority of parenting, people learn parenting how? It's learned behaviour. That's how they were grown, so they're going to try and do the same. The world has changed, brothers and sisters, simple as that.
Yeah.
The world has changed, and if you think, and one of the things, and someone I was mentioning to my colleague the other day, we need to revisit parenting, because some of us have never visited it. And part of Deenagers is working with parents, bringing them back into a learning environment. You know, do you know what's happening on your child's Facebook? Who's on their BB? Who's, you know, what's going on at school? You know, what does their Twitter look like? That's just from the social media aspect. But what about their peer group? That youth club that they go to once a week, what does that look like? I was in it, and this is very important. There was a school recently who put on a sexual health. They didn't call it sexual health, they just called it health and, you know, well-being session. But when I looked into it, some of the stuff they were teaching the young people, right, their parents would have been mortified, because one, it wasn't culturally competent, right? Two, it almost said, well, if you're going to, you know, get involved in relationships and have sex and so on, then just be safe. There's no issue of halal or haram.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not naive. I've worked with people who work in the sexual health clinics in Birmingham. They told me and shown me the statistics, especially around young Muslims. So I'm not naive, and I think a lot of parents are naive what's happening out there. The reality is that we have to start revisiting parenting. We have to start engaging these young people. There are a lot of, I always see all the time, nights of inspiration here, and they bring over these nasheed artists. And
you mentioned that earlier. I mean, you know, let's talk about that. That's on an international scale, isn't it?
I mean, look, you see every few months, the night of inspiration, they bring over these nasheed artists. Let me tell you something. The young people out there are not listening to those nasheed artists. They're listening to those hardcore, I mean, some of them are, but the majority of them, they are listening to those hardcore underground rappers from Birmingham, London, Manchester. I'm not even about America here. And a lot of parents are naive to think that, oh yeah, you know, there's artists on you see them on YouTube, local artists, 1.4 million hits. You know, the content of their lyrics is totally un-Islamic. Now, the reality is that that's out there, but how do we support our young people to navigate around that? You know, I'm happy to have a conversation about Nicki Minaj to young people, to young people in my own family, but in a way that's, you know, say, well, let's look at these artists, let's look at their lifestyles. I mean, before I've been on here with Napoleon, Brother Muta, we came on here when he was on doing the British tour, and one of the things you speak about is he highlights what the reality is behind the scenes are in the music industry. So I'm saying is that I think there needs to be an element of waking up and
I think
engaging,
you know,
correctly.
spelling it out, you know, I always, you know, I was previously in the music business, and I think what people really need to realise, ultimately what made me step out of it, is you cannot control how other people are going to take to you, how much they're going to fall in love with my voice, how they're going to fall in love with the lyrical content of my music, and it doesn't stop there. So then we have these young people that are like, okay, what's she wearing, who's she mingling with, who's she speaking to, and what happens is these young people fall in love with the artist, and then what? When this artist turns out wearing black nail varnish, you know, looking like, you know, studded black leather stuff, you know, whatever, looking like these, what do you call them, you know, the goth people. You know, why? Because at the end of the day, we know when we define what worship is.
Well, look, let me...
It's very broad, isn't it?
Yeah, but let me come in there. If you look at... We mentioned... And I'm not a person who studied her specifically. If you look at one of the mainstream artists like Nicki Minaj, right?
Okay.
She did a performance at the Grammys recently.
Gosh, yeah.
The scenario was... She was at an altar being sacrificed. There was a bishop on stage. There was like a devil worship scenario, flames and everything. No. Some people might just say, oh, it's just entertainment.
And it started off with the scene where she's actually
praying and
the scene from Exorcist, where
Exorcist,
she actually is in the corner of this room, and she's possessed.
Exactly.
You know.
Now, in my research, by the time a child reaches the average child, by the time a child reaches 6 to 7 years old, he or she would have seen about 50,000 violent or sexual images.
Right.
All right.
Oh.
Now, we're talking about here is a total, not just an issue around Islamic, it's also around value base and the moral compass. One of the things we're aiming to do with Deenagers is engage the most hard to reach, because I see them in prison. I see them in the pupil referral units getting excluded. We all know the statistics around underachievement, and we can often talk about it, but it's not one of those just make dua issues. People have to start rolling up their sleeves in a coordinated manner and we have to work with our young people. We're the ones that are going to have to do youth work, because you know we're in the middle of austerity. You know youth work is not on the top priority of this government. Everybody knows that. So what happens? We're in a city, Birmingham's a city that historically was built upon unskilled labour. So we had the factories, the Rovers of this world, Lucases, etc. A lot of those young people who are coming out of school now with, you know, low qualifications, where they're going to work, where they're going to go, you know, what's going to happen. So you're starting to see now.
And you know, I don't know if you managed to listen to the interview last week with Cypher. He's just released a book. Yeah. And you know, he touched on that, the fact that we have to prepare the youth, you know, and empower them, you know, to employ people in the future and make their, you know, accomplish their own visions. Because, you know, you're correct. You know, the government, let's face it, have made a lot of cuts. There are no longer any youth centres.
And there's some more cuts to come in the next few weeks.
Yeah, and you know, I think as a parent, don't be ignorant. You need to wake up and see not only what is in store for you, because they're going to cut housing benefit. If you're living in a 3-bedroom and it's only fit for 2, then you're going to have to get downgraded. There are going to be a lot of changes.
But something else as well. It's about the fault lines have been blurred. I shot a film recently, a documentary, and some of the young people wanted to shoot it in a shisha lounge.
Right. Oh gosh. Okay.
Now, I will go on record and say this as a person who's had you know, I embraced Islam. For me, shisha lounges are nightclubs without DJs and alcohol. Well, actually, there is DJs in there, literally. So there are only nightclubs without alcohol. Now, this whole thing, it's an halal environment. Is it really? Now, people say, you're going in too hard, Ray. But the reality is that what's acceptable out there as being now becoming the norm, what do you think will happen over a period of time? How many, if those things were acceptable, how many parents would go there with their daughters? Yeah,
I guess for me, what I see though is that if a child or a young person, you know, feels that is a suitable environment for them to step into, then it leaves them open to taking it to another level, you know. But I mean, I don't know much about shisha lounge, but you know, the fact that they say that, I think when you do it, it's like you've smoked 50 cigarettes or something like that. Yeah, I mean, that in itself is an injustice against your body, you know, like surely that in itself is haram.
As you know, as mankind, as insan, we can convince ourselves of anything. And I'm just saying, you know, I'm not trying to be that party pooper, that uncle who kills it. All I'm saying is that we have to offer an alternative to these young people.
Yeah.
Yeah, else they will be going to the shisha lounges, and then, you know, they will be going to other places. You know, Broad Street, I remember, you know, we talk about music. What used to be into music and DJ, I used to DJ at daytime Bangladesh, and I used to do the hip hop and the soul element. Why is there no daytime Bangladesh anymore? Because there's no need for it, because Muslims are clubbing. They're on Broad Street. There's no need for them to go college anymore, change into their clothes in break time, go to these 1 till and I know a lot of parents out there remember these Bangladesh.
Oh dear.
You know, have these discos in the nightclubs in the daytime, and then go back home in the same clothes and act like nothing ever happened.
We're come to the end of the first part. It's gone really quickly. So are you okay to stay behind for the second part?
Yeah, no problem.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so in the second part we'll go into detail. If there are parents now that want to know how to get involved in Deenagers, then you know, stay in tune, and we'll see you after the break, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. You're listening to Unity FM 93.5.